Well, I just don't want to do a term.
But
From
the
the
money
mayor's office,
for
they all have
Best
questions about
Part
that.
actually has to center too. All that money is still there, and actually we're
The list is good.
right now, and even
You want me to give this back or?
but it is, I'm not sure what it is you want to do, but I'm happy to sit down and talk to you. It's just not a grant, it's, it's not a grant, so this isn't part of the budget. Grants actually don't go, that's my grant.
Chicos, I've had this for about 10 years.
They don't even have grants, but
I told him, I talked to him all the time. I told him to call you.
that is not ideal.
Davina, just let me know when you're ready.
And it gets done in person.
You're all right.
I would prefer to sit down and
They're live.
we can strategize this and get it moving because it's not anything that, that is being delayed or held back. It's just the other kind of functions of the department. So I have a conversation with you and where we're at and then figure out how to move forward.
Okay.
That's not true. Yeah, no, but let me take your name and number and I will, give you a call and we can talk. I'll call you now. And the three of us can actually sit down and talk about the timeline and when the improvements are, because I had asked Roy about that as well. I think this,
Are you guys ready?
and it really just is a function, you know, his capacity. So what's your name again? Yeah, we've met at the, sometimes I don't recognize with the map.
Other than that, you ready, Judy? Okay. Today is Wednesday, May 11th. It's 5:37. This is the continuation of the budget hearings. Today's budget hearings will be over planning and development, parks, business services, planning and zoning, community and economic development. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Mr. Mays?
Present.
Mr. Murphy?
Present.
Ms. Priestley?
Present.
Ms. Burns?
Present.
Mr. Pfeiffer?
Present.
Thank you.
We have 5 present. We have before us Ms. Suzanne Wilcox, and you're going to go over the planning and development budget. We appreciate you coming, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for inviting me tonight and for giving me your time. I'm going to go over and you Okay. I'm going to go over the information that was provided to you in your budget packet. Really just an overview of the Planning and Development Department, but I think it gives a really good description of what we do. So the Planning and Development Department, through partnerships with businesses, local nonprofits, and other units of local government and citizens, continue Flint's transformation into a safe, healthy, and sustainable city. They achieve these goals through multiple divisions, and those divisions include the Division of Community and Economic Development, Business Services, which is formerly known as Building and Safety Inspections, and was changed in the 2013 reorganization, as well as Planning and Zoning and Parks, which is a component unit of Planning and Zoning. Business Services Division, formerly BSI, protects the health and welfare of the community. The division's goal is to provide streamlined, business-friendly plan review, permitting, and inspections in compliance with state and local laws. The division has a team of state-licensed inspectors to ensure the safety and well-being of residents and is able to provide inspection services for all trades. The Community and Economic Development Division continues to be an important component of the City of Flint's mission. This division oversees federal entitlement dollars, which most of you are familiar with as CDBG, or Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment Partnership, which is for housing activities, and Emergency Solutions Grant, or ESG, which is for homelessness prevention. The goal of these grants is to provide decent, safe, and sanitary housing, to provide community development services such as public services, blight remediation, there's economic development activities, there's multiple activities that community development block grant funds can be used for. And then the Planning and Zoning Division is responsible for overseeing how land will be used in the city of Flint. The Planning Division supports the work of the Planning Commission, the Historic District Commission, and the Zoning Board of Appeals, using the Imagine Flint Master Plan as a guiding document. Planning staff directs neighborhood stabilization, future growth, and revitalization efforts towards becoming a green, sustainable, and healthy community. By respecting the overall views and interests of the community and people who are impacted by specific projects or changes, the staff works with people to build consensus solutions that improve the quality of life for Flint residents and community members, while also improving economic opportunities for residents and local businesses. The Planning and Zoning Division also administers, as you're very well aware, the licensing and regulation of medical and adult use marijuana businesses in the city of Flint. Eligible marijuana licenses in the city include medical marijuana provisioning centers, retail facilities, commercial marijuana secure transport facilities, commercial marijuana growing centers, commercial marijuana processing centers, and commercial marijuana safety compliance facilities and micro businesses. And finally, the Parks and Recreation Division. The Parks and Recreation Fund accounts for the annual tax levy used to improve and maintain city parks, forestry, and recreation services. Parks provide residents and community members with valuable spaces to gather, relax, exercise, and play. Thriving parks attract new residents, businesses, and investments. I've heard somewhere that $1 investment in parks and recreation activities, and that includes multiple types of activities, including dollars in economic development investment in a community. So we take our park services very seriously. Unfortunately, the tax levy is the only dedicated source of funding for parks administration, operations, and maintenance. So that $300,000 plus a year is actually what pays for all of the services that we provide through Parks and Recreation, and it is the reason that we partner with multiple community groups, organizations, parks adopters, and others to really leverage those funding and try to stretch those dollars. Because the majority of that funding goes towards mowing, actually, of the parks. There's 70 city parks in the city of Flint. So the staff work to implement the goals and objectives of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, which we're very proud of. It was adopted last year, as defined by the community through visioning sessions and community meetings. These goals and objectives are grounded in a vision of an extensive network of parks and open spaces that are safe, accessible, and ecologically sustainable. Staff also work, because of the shortage and millage funds for parks, to aggressively seek out other funding sources to supplement the small parks millage fund. The city has formed partnerships in many of its parks, many of which are with local block clubs and community groups. In addition, several major institutions have sponsored Flint Parks as well, including Genesee County Parks and Recreation Commission, Keep Genesee County Beautiful, Friends of Burston, and the Police Activities League. And then there are other activities that planning and development actually administer, including the street, weirdly sometimes people think, but the Street Lights Fund. There's an Economic Development Administration revolving loan fund. There's a Section 108 loan fund, which is a function of Community Development Block Grant. And then the other big portion is the Building Inspection Fund, which we talked about, business services. That's actually, an enterprise fund in which it's funded solely. There's no general fund dollars that go into our BSI division. It's funded solely by the revenue that's generated through fees, fines, and costs for permits, inspections, and enforcement. So that is a summary of planning and development and the different divisions within its purview.
Madam Chair.
Councilman Mays.
Yeah. Suzanne, if I look on page 33, the planning and development budget, the revenues that I see proposed for 2023 is $245,000. Is that correct?
That is what was proposed in the budget, yes.
And that's what you agreed to?
Yes.
Okay. And then the expenditures is 1.2 million.
Yes.
And so the expenditures must be a combination of general fund money and other monies. The 245,000 is general fund revenue.
That's correct.
Okay, and so about $1 million is coming from another combination of revenues, including what?
This is the general fund budget, so that includes our marijuana budget. So that is, there's marijuana revenue that I believe is in here. Expenditures are, they might be from other grants or from other general funds that are actually identified in other sections of this document.
When could I see a breakdown of that?
I believe Finance has provided this to everyone, and I would rely upon Finance to provide the breakdowns to the rest of City Council.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult for me to do a budget when I don't see a breakdown. This finance director or this finance department has done that with a variety of departments, and this one seemed to be no different. When we have these hearings with the department heads, what seems to blow my mind, from the mayor's office to planning to whatever, police, we can't get the line item breakdowns. That's kind of difficult for me. I had a call from a lady who's here today. Her name is Miss Bell. She describes herself as she stays on Philadelphia in the first ward, and she called me. But she said she had some conversation and some commitments for a park. Madam Chair, can I get fresh in my memory with Ms. Bell and see if I want to do a budget amendment to see if somebody committed to her something? Is there a way we can do that right quick?
Can you restate that, Councilman Mays?
Yeah, I want to ask
Because
Ms. Bell.
your voice gets like a low baritone voice, because your request is to get,
I want to hear from Ms. Bell about this 1.2 million for Haskell. And the reason I want to hear from her is because if we only put in 225,000, Ms. Wilcox, my brain had to lock down for a minute. It's a sheet back here that deals specifically with parks, and you reference the parks millage. I just looked at it. What page is that parks revenue on?
I believe it's on page 39.
Yeah, page 39, and it shows revenues of 417,000, and it shows expenditures of 700,000. And so once again, do we know where that extra revenue for those expenditures are coming from?
So this budget right here, I think part of the answer to that, the difference, because I just want to clarify, when I talked about a $300,000 plus budget for the parks millage, that is actually that money, or that identification of that number, comes from the finance department, and it's based on the property taxes. So there's an increase in property taxes that have been generated this year. So just to clarify the difference between what I said and the FY 2023 proposed. So it looks like the parks millage actually is going to be $459,380, which is actually good news for the Parks Fund. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then I also want to clarify your point, because I did speak to Ms. Bell, and grants dollars are not included in this budget. So you don't see any revenue that is proposed for the Haskell Center, for example, in this case, because those improvements are funded by grants, including CDBG, and I believe there's an MDNR grant for the Haskell Center, so they're not reflected in.
What I've noticed, though, when it get to community block grant expenditures and budget money, I'm very familiar with the opportunity that the council have to listen to the recommendations of the Citywide Advisory Committee, but to shift money around. Are you familiar with a commitment of, what was it, Ms. Bell, 1.2 million for Haskell Park?
I am familiar with a few commitments to Haskell, including Bassett Park. It's not just for Haskell, or actually Bassett Park. I don't want to.
Was that Bassett Park, Miss? Both.
Yeah. I don't want to speak to the number because I don't have that offhand.
Who made those commitments?
I believe, like, as I said, they're from Community Development Block Grant, and I believe there's also an MDNR grant for that center. And there also has been, not in this budget, but some expenditures from the city's general fund for Haskell Center itself.
You made those commitments?
I personally don't make commitments. As you know, block grant is something that is recommended by recommendations through the CWAC, and then they come to this body for
Ms.
approval.
Ms. Bell, who made the commitment? And who verbally made those commitments? You know Michael Lawler?
I do.
And who else? So, Ms. Wilcox, do you believe that it's an opportunity for us budget-wise and/or community block grant-wise to live up to those commitments if they were in fact made?
I believe those commitments were made. I'm just saying I don't want to speak to the 1.3 million. I would trust Ms. Bell's word. I'm just saying I'm not familiar with that figure personally, but I believe those commitments were made and that funding is still available. There is funding still available for Haskell Center.
Where's
She
the funding
referenced-
at?
It's in the account that's allocated for the Haskell Center. She referenced a staff person, Michael Lawler, who is no longer with the city, and his position unfortunately has not been filled.
She also, in the telephone conversation, if I'm not mistaken, she referenced the mayor as well. Would that be a fact? So what I want to do, Ms. Wilcox, at the time,
Point of order.
What's your point of order?
In all due respect, this is a budget hearing to hear from Suzanne Wilcox, the Planning Department, and if the residents or anybody outside of this have any additional information to give to the colleagues or to the Planning Department, we have a session available for the public to speak for this budget hearing. Is an opportunity for public speaking. I think it's inappropriate for us to be having dialogue with the public in the middle of us having dialogue with Suzanne Wilcox and the council. That is what this platform is for. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to provide some clarity. This meeting is very informal. That's what we don't have. There's basically decorum that is here. Some of the questions, I think, are legitimate that she's asking in regards to, because Suzanne needed answers in regards to Haskell Center, and Mrs. Bell does have those answers. So it's a very quick inquiry, and most residents, I hate to say, our meetings go very long, so they don't generally stay till 11, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. So,
I appeal
Councilman,
the-
it's not an appealing, Councilman Murphy. It is just basically just decorum here. So there's no appeal that we do during these type of hearings.
Could you show me in the rules where,
No, I'm not going to show you in the rules. It's an informal meeting, and I've said it from the beginning. Now, there's the one thing that does apply, which would be disorderly conduct, which is we have had people who have had to be removed from the meeting. So in this meeting, we are allowed open dialogue so that we can, it's basically like suspension of the rules, so we can ask the questions that need to be asked. And I know you're very time conscious with the time, and the time that we're spending going back and forth. Ms. Bell could have finished her past two questions.
in all due respect, I don't think we're going back and forth, and respect of me being a council person, I do have a right to bring some order to this meeting, and I never heard where we had dialogue going back and forth. And I've been attending these meetings over 20 years, and I have never seen a budget hearing to where we went back and forth with the public. And I'm not saying what the young lady is saying ain't important. I'm saying we came here with the goal to hear from Suzanne Woodcock. That's what I'm saying.
Suzanne is responding back to her in some of those questions, Councilman Murphy. Haskell is very important as the summer comes, having PAL there at Haskell, because that side of town doesn't have a park that children or teens can go to. I've been to the facility, and it is one that can be saved, and it's in the 2nd Ward. It's not my ward, but it is in the city of Flint. So if we're getting questions and we have all the people here, I feel that it's fair to listen, to what she has to say so that Suzanne can have the answers. We have had, Haskell has been closed for a while, and if we can get a park opened up for children, and I wish we'd get the pool open there, because the pool, the tile looks good, but they're storing things in it, equipment from the football league and different things. I know the gym floors were done. I'm going to allow it. Councilman Mays, proceed.
Madam Chair, this is a small budget for Parks and for Suzanne, Ms. Wilcox's department, and I'm going to always ask her, do she need more? And our job is to allocate. As it relates to Haskell and Ms. Bell, I'm going to listen. I'm going to receive calls. I'm going to listen. I'm going to invite folks. I'm glad that her and Ms. Wilcox had a conversation, and I'm glad that Ms. Wilcox is familiar with what she's saying. And so I think I was at the point of asking you, Ms. Wilcox, do we need to allocate this money from a different account? Would it be general fund money? Would it be block grant money? You referred to an account. But let me say this, Ms. Burns, I appreciate your ruling. We probably could be done by now. And I want the public to see, because there's 5 council people here. The Open Meetings Act say whenever we convene, we can hear from the public. What council person want to hinder the public from public input? I want the public to see that. I want the law to see that. Ms. Wilcox, what fund would that be from? And if it's anything I can do, Ms. Bell, I concentrate heavily on Hasselbrink. You kind of put me in a bind. I'm in the 1st Ward on Philadelphia, but I've been working with Haskell and Bassett Park. Ms. Wilcox, what fund were you referring to?
The funding that is allocated to Haskell right now is currently available in a contract. It's encumbered in a contract, in an account for Haskell Center from, as I said, Community Development Block Grant funds. So what I asked Ms. Bell is to set some time. I told her I would call her tomorrow, and we can discuss this tomorrow. And to your other question,
So that's a good thing, Ms. Bell. Go ahead, Ms. Wilson.
do I need more money?
Yeah.
So,
But before you answer that, and I'm eager to get the answer, but let me interrupt you. Have y'all had any park or recreational type conversation with Ernst & Young as it relates to qualifications for the ARPA funds when it comes to parks and recreation and children? And I know grown folks use parks too. I'm very interested in trying to see if I feel like I want to do any resolutions to kind of help supplement these meager dollars that I see in your budget.
yes, we have had conversations with Ernst & Young as to, eligibility of ARPA funding for parks, and I know that they are working on their plan that they will be presenting ultimately, to the mayor and then to city council. My understanding is that parks improvements are eligible and that there are some dollars that will be allocated within those categories towards parks improvements generally. So I'm eager to see the final version of that, and
Miss, you haven't seen the final version?
Not the final version, no.
Wouldn't it be fair to say that the council can allocate funds and amend the budget and make it happen? You familiar with that process, correct?
Are you talking about ARPA, or are you talking
I'm talking about most all funds.
I mean, the council obviously has the job to adopt a budget and make approve budget
That's
amendments.
correct. And if somebody vetoed those budget amendments, ain't but one person in the city who can veto it. 6 votes of the council overrides any veto, and that budget is adopted. So I'm the type of council person, I don't want to wait till the budget process closes up to wait to hear if somebody is going to allocate. When you have residents like Ms. Bell and others that want public safety, they want money put in parks, we have a pot of money. I want to probe before the first Monday in June, right, Ms. Burns?
Yes.
By the first Monday in June, we must allocate money and adopt budgets. And I'm getting nervous because I don't see the process really being detailed. So, Ms. Wilcox, without me interrupting you, I think you was on the verge of telling me if your budget needs more money in any area.
I would just like to say, I mean, related to parks generally and related to the activities of planning and development, I am certainly committed to parks. It's something that we've advocated for heavily for funding for parks millage dollars. I think it's an important component of this city of Flint to provide opportunities for recreation, for outdoor activities, especially to a population that's been impacted by a water crisis and a lead crisis and now a pandemic. So parks and outdoor recreational opportunities are extremely important to me, and I think people who know, the work of planning and development would know that I advocate for them heavily. To the point about whether we need more money, I will say every department in the city of Flint, I'm sure would say yes, and I would agree with that, but I also know that we work together as a team, for the best, purpose for the city of Flint. And so I believe that the budget that was put together, our budget is primarily a status quo budget, and it reflects, I think, the best efforts of everyone to address the significant needs of the city while addressing the significant shortcomings of the city. So while I would say generally, yes, we could always use more money, I recognize that in the context of, our existing financial constraints, I think the budget that is being proposed for planning and development is very sustainable.
Let me say this, and then I'm going to give up the floor, Ms. Burns. You talk very well for a department head working under this administration, you and most other departments. But what I noticed about this budget, none of the ARPA funds was put in it. And I also noticed from other departments, the police, your department, you keep telling us something is on the horizon. We'll wait to see what's on the horizon. I can't speak but for one council person. That would be the elected person of the first ward. But if I had my way, they wouldn't be if they were on the horizon, we'd know about them before the first Monday in June. And we would publicly allocate funds, not just for your department, but for public safety and others. I see Mr. Brown, Arnold Brown came in. I'm going to bring budget amendments. And if that's the position that you want to take, no details in the budget, if I see the clerk here, I'm going to look at a budget amendment that deals with a staff person dealing with minutes and resolutions to help us with what I think the legal department ain't doing. So I hear you. If I was in your position, I might say the same thing, but I was elected to have a brain and some common sense. And I don't know what this majority of council will do with the amendments that I bring. I'm going to wait, Ms. Bell, until y'all talk tomorrow, and then, I trust both of what both of y'all say, Ms. Wilcox and yourself, and then I'll find out before the first Monday in June, the time closing in, and then I'll find out before the allocations of block grant money. But you saying you believe that money is already budgeted somewhere in a special fund. And so, Ms. Burns, I appreciate your ruling, and I want to say to anybody who try to prohibit me from communicating with residents, I'm always find a way to do it, because that's who pays my voting bills, and that's who puts me in this office. And when they call me, I'm going to pay attention to them, whether it's 1 or whether it's 20. I'm always figure it out. Ms. Wilcox, I think I've heard enough. Ms. Burns, I would want to be excused for a minute, and then I want to give all that time to folks who is jockeying for it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilman Mays. Any other council members would like to speak with Ms. Wilcox?
Yes. You want to go?
It doesn't matter.
You can go first.
Okay.
Councilman Pfeiffer, you have the floor, sir.
Ms. Wilcox, it looks like you're adding a position. Is that correct?
Adding what?
Adding a position?
Adding a position?
Yes.
I believe we're adding more than one position. There are several positions that we're proposing for next year's budget. So what page are you referencing?
I'm just looking at the dollar value of between 418 and 611, so I guess that is probably at least 2 people.
I'm sorry, are you talking about just the Parks Fund, or are you talking?
No, planning and development.
Oh, okay.
Page 33 of my document.
Okay. I was looking at the position summary page on 54.
No, I was just looking at the straight dollar amount. I'd get a roundabout by the dollar amount, so I'm guessing it's at least 2 people.
So these are just general fund positions. So this is just a general fund budget. So we are actually proposing, if you look at page 54, which has the total planning and development full-time positions, and full-time on 54 and then part-time on 55, we're actually proposing several additions from a variety of sources of funds. So there are positions, there are actually 5 new positions that are proposed for planning and development.
So majority of those are in the building and safety?
Yes, there are several in building and safety. There's one in CED. There's one in planning and zoning. And yes, the rest are building and safety.
I don't see the,
In building and safety, new positions,
looks
we
like 4.
are proposing one,
Ms.
to-
Wilcox, can you get us a copy of that?
Yeah, I don't think we're looking at the same thing.
Yeah, can you email later a copy of that to everyone? Judy, would that help you?
Because it looks to me that there's only, according to page 54, there's only 4 in building and safety, none in community development or planning.
Yeah, there have, I think, been some changes. So we're talking about adding a development technician. We currently have 2. We're talking about adding a 3rd position.
So I don't think any of that is in our documentation.
Yeah, this is just, I believe, a summary of all of the positions. So in terms of, what was adopted in FY '22 versus what is proposed and forecasted in FY '24, though that's just a cumulative summary. So it doesn't include any changes between positions, et cetera. So
This budget, what you're proposing, adds a head count of 4 according to my numbers.
yes, that's correct.
Okay. And is that, what is that for? Because is it for the new zoning ordinance to implement that? What are those new 4 head counts for?
One of the positions is, one of the planner ones that's proposed for planning and zoning is to assist with the workload in planning and zoning for certainly adoption of the new zoning code, but also just due to the overload of work that is entailed with marijuana. licensing. That has been, I think, something that I don't think anyone anticipated, the workload that results from that. So that planner
So,
one,
so we're going to add a couple of people, 1, 2 for marijuana when it would be a losing proposition for the city since we only got $83,000 worth of revenue from the city?
that's the state shared revenue that comes from the sales. There's actually application licenses and
How much,
fees.
where's that dollar value at?
That is in your budget, I think, under the marijuana. I'm not sure where it is in the budget document, but there's essentially $75,000 that is projected for fees from license applications from all of the marijuana facilities that have been licensed by the Planning Commission and then City Council. And they pay whether they're licensed or not. They are, as they apply for a license, they're required to pay a $5,000 fee. And it's, whether they.
But so where's that revenue at? I don't see that revenue.
I believe it's included in the general fund budget, because it's part of the general fund, but I don't know what line item it is on this. I was looking through the document that was provided to you, and I don't see a separate breakout for marijuana.
Just concerned we're giving away our community and we're going to potentially lose money on hiring people and we're not sustaining that with enough revenue. Even at $175,000 in application fees and $100,000 in tax revenue, that's a loss for the city. Would you agree?
I would agree with that, and I would say that is, something that this body, has the ability to regulate.
What would you recommend?
In terms of, are you talking about numbers of facilities? That's not, at this point, it is, there is no cap. It's legislated by locational restrictions and requirements. So if there was some number that this body wanted to see on the numbers of marijuana facilities, that's something that, and I said this in our presentation on the zoning code, that's something that you can take up and consider when the permanent marijuana ordinance, which will be revised after the zoning code is adopted, is brought forward to you. That's something to absolutely consider. And we don't, I guess I just want to say that, planning and development, we are implementers and administrators of the policies that this body, your body, adopts. So we are not for or against. We might have some feelings or, perceptions or just experiences, based upon how it's being implemented that we're happy to share. But at this point, we're implementing what's in front of us. And so whether it is actually, viable or a good idea or something, that's something for this body to entertain and for us to provide input based upon our experience. But at this point, we're just implementing what has been adopted by you. So we don't have control over that and whether it's a good idea. I would agree that it's, the number, if we're talking 30 marijuana licenses, more coming every day, is that viable? Is it a good option for the city of Flint? I say when it gets to that point, take a look at the ordinance and let's make a determination on what's a good number.
Are
for
we
the
still
city.
getting applications even though the Detroit opened up theirs? Are we still getting applications up here?
Absolutely. We get applications every week.
I think that this body has to look at that because it was sold to the community that it's going to be a revenue generator, it's going to do this, it's going to be an economic stimulus, it's going to be, whatever else. And looking at the sheer numbers and the administration responsibility in the tax revenue, I don't see any of that coming to fruition.
I don't disagree with that at all, and it was not sold to the body and to the community by the Planning and Development Department. When there was discussion about marijuana licensing, understanding that, this body wanted to opt in and wanted to make sure that there was economic opportunity, I don't disagree with that. But there was information, there were facts presented, we had representatives from some groups come to speak to the then City Council, obviously before your time, to talk about real numbers, because there were lots of numbers that were being presented to the City Council, and we didn't agree with those numbers. We felt that they were overstated, certainly for the City of Flint. The state of Michigan, outside of the actual applicants, is the biggest revenue receiver from marijuana licensing. Next is Genesee County, next is the city of Flint. So
Have we done a study, and do we need to relook at our fee schedule? Our marijuana fees and licenses or whatever, are they similar or comparable to surrounding communities or others in Michigan?
they're actually capped by the state of Michigan.
Okay.
So they're capped at $5,000 per license, and that's what we charge.
And that's a yearly, right?
Yes, it's annual.
Okay. While we're talking about new zoning ordinance, when is that going to be ready for my copy?
So that was actually presented, there were some formatting changes that Clerk Brown requested, and I am hoping, I know that, I told her I think that should be ready by this Friday. They're very minor formatting changes, so the document.
That was presented to Ms. Brown?
Pardon?
The zoning code was presented to Ms. Brown?
The zoning code prior to the formatting changes that she requested last week, yes, that has been presented. It was actually, we were hoping it would be on the council agenda 2 weeks ago. So that document is already in process. The only changes that we were asked to actually make on behalf of the clerk's office, because typically it's the clerk's office who makes the ordinance formatting. So we did that on their behalf, Planning and Development did. We actually outsourced that. And we said we would make the changes on their behalf as well. They're very minor. They're really talking about, there's some footers on the document that need to be removed. There's some language that needs to be added. But what you have, if you have not received it already, I know Clerk Brown has the original document that we provided. If you're interested in starting to review that right now,
I want to see the final that is going to come before this body and be adopted.
And so that's what I'm saying, except for the minor formatting changes, she does not have that.
Okay.
The document she has is the one that we presented, hoping it would get on the schedule for council review on May 10th. So I understand that it's not, there's some desire to see the final version. I'm just sharing that final version is substantially unchanged except for formatting issues from the document that you or she already has.
So, I'm sorry, Ms. Brown you want to speak? You're probably going to want to get to a microphone, Ms. Brown.
For clarity of the body as well as the public body, I think it's important to understand that what I was seeking from you is what Mr. Pfeiffer is looking for in terms of the overall plan itself. Okay? And so that's what you and I have been talking about. And when I talked to you today, you indicated that you would be getting it to me by Friday or no later than Monday. So what I have is not exactly what he's requesting. It's not the final product. So I just think it's important that we clarify that. Okay? Thank you.
I think that that's fine. I just want to be clear that except for formatting changes, what was presented is exactly there's no substantive, there's no language changes, there's nothing. It's essentially shifting, and it's really a publishing requirement for when it gets published in the legal, and I'm just clarifying because I understand that that's the desire of the city clerk and your desire to see that version. I just want to be clear that the document that has been provided is going to be substantially unchanged from the revision that you will receive.
So is it your opinion that I'm the holdup of putting this up forward?
I'm not trying to assign blame anywhere.
You did last night.
I'm saying what needs to happen, what I understand needs to happen that you're waiting for, because we provided a document, we presented a
So are
document.
are you clear of what Ms. Brown is requesting?
Formatting changes to the document that we provided 3 weeks ago.
Okay. And then that's coming either Friday or Monday?
That is my goal. That's
Okay.
my expectation.
I just don't appreciate being lied upon in my opinion of what you did last night.
Oh, I don't believe I lied upon anything.
You said that I was basically the holdup.
I don't think I used that language at all. I said that the document had been provided to the clerk's office And it was my understanding that you wanted, Council,
I want what we're supposed to approve. I don't want a website link. We're not going to approve legislation off a website link. I want the actual, we approve ordinances based on how the format is correct and approved by the attorney's office. And we don't approve an ordinance based off of a plain Jane Word document. That's not what this body does.
so what I'm saying is the document that was provided to the clerk's office 3 weeks ago was in ordinance format. It was not the version that's on the website. The version that we discussed in our presentation to this body was the actual ordinance that has been developed and drafted. And let me say, on behalf of the clerk's office, because it is typically not planning and development's function to format that document. So we did that. We outsourced that because it was our understanding that the clerk's office did not have the bandwidth to do that. So we paid for that work to get done so that we could move it forward. When we presented that document in ordinance format, not the document that's on the city website, which is exactly the same, but it's in ordinance format now, we were asked, again, for planning and development, separate. This, again, is not typically our work. This is typically the clerk's office to format the ordinance, to make changes to that document, which we agreed to do because we are trying to move it forward. So in terms of where, the holdup is, at this point, it is not our feeling that it's planning and development.
But you feel it's mine. You feel it's me.
I didn't say you personally. It's my understanding
My
that
name.
you are the one that, I did. I said,
Yeah.
because it's my understanding that you are the one that wants to review the
I want a copy of what is
784
going to be
pages,
adopted.
which you have right now,
I don't
except
have
for,
it.
if you don't have it, it's been provided to the clerk's office. So if you do not have
Ms.
that.
Wilcox, because I think what Mr. Pfeiffer is stating, he wants the complete product. He wants it to where it's a product to where the final draft, to where everything is complete right before we do vote on it. So that would include all publishing, editing, formatting, so that he's not looking at something that still needs formatting, publishing, and editing. Yes, Ms. Brown?
I think to add to what Mr. Pfeiffer has just indicated, when we receive ordinances, those ordinances, the format is done by the legal department, not us. Okay? So I think Suzanne needs to understand that. And in that regard, what we received was not formatted correctly. Therefore, that's why we sent it back, so that it's formatted correctly. Okay? But it's done by the legal department. Thank you.
Ms. Wilcox, is that so that you and Mr. Pfeiffer, because I think there's dialogue back and forth, are we clear on that?
It's my understanding that that is what he's waiting for in order for this to move forward. And I'm just being clear, and I said this last night at a planning commission meeting, that that is what is holding it up right now. So regardless of whether it's the clerk's office or the law office, it's not planning and development. So that's what I'm saying. We're doing this on behalf of the clerk's office or the law office, whatever the case may be. We're trying to get it done, to move it forward, and that is our goal. And then it's my understanding that Mr. Pfeiffer wants to review the 784 pages, which my only point to that is understanding he wants it in the format that he wants to, it will ultimately come to council. That document is available, whether you agree or not, on the website and has been since 2017. So I would encourage everyone to start reviewing it now. You have an opportunity. I remember Councilwoman Burns at the actual zoning presentation, you were talking about the documentation that we provided you that night, that you appreciated having it because you wanted to take some time to review it. And I said then, it is available right now. It's been available since 2017.
This body
And that's
does
my only
not
point.
approve legislation off a website. I'll say it and I'll say it again.
I hear you.
Okay.
And that's what I'm saying, is I understand you're waiting for that document, the formatting changes, and we will provide that to you. Just want to be clear where the wait is
So it's
coming from.
it's in legal to finish the formatting.
No, we're doing it. Planning and Development is doing it.
So it's with you now?
Yes.
Okay, and by Monday, so I'll give you, not Friday, let's say by Monday, We should have it.
That's
yeah.
what I shared with
Okay.
Clerk Brown.
Okay, so by Monday.
And to say that because I want to review it, that I'm the cog in the wheel. Anybody that doesn't want to review it is derelict of their duties. So, Madam Chair, I'm done.
That's not what I said. I don't disagree.
Thank
I would
you, Councilman
encourage
Pfeiffer.
everyone to review it, absolutely. You should. All I'm saying is that right now, everyone has the opportunity to review it beginning right now.
I would just, Madam Chair, I would just allow the public to review what she said last night and what she's saying today. That's all.
Thank you, Councilman Pfeiffer. Councilman Murphy, you had yielded the floor to Councilman Pfeiffer. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Suzanne, the citywide advisory committee that we have presently, you guys are approved the 2022-2023 CDB block grant applications. You reviewed them. How many members are on the citywide advisory committee?
I believe there are 4 active members right now. There are many vacancies, and I can actually get you that list because I don't want to misspeak, but it's not fully, everyone that has been appointed is not fully participating, and I believe there are 4 active members, but let me look that up for sure and get you that information.
Do you know how many members were present at this last review of the applications?
I do not.
Okay. I'm hearing there was only 2
Okay.
members. So that's concerning to me that we have 2 members reviewing. What is the budget of the Community Development Block Grant?
It's for CDBG, it's approximately $3.8 million.
So we probably
We
got
actually don't have our allocations this year yet, but last year was about 3.8 or 3.9.
So allegedly, we may only have 2 members. Usually, I remember when Betty Ramsdale used to lead that advisory committee. I think she was the chair of the citywide advisory committee, and it used to be like 10 or 9 people that review applications. That's very concerning that only 2 people may have made recommendations that will be coming to this body for approval.
I understand that. I don't know how many people participated in the review. I was not present, but I do know that my staff reached out on multiple occasions to all of the active members to try and get people to come to the meetings. And because we are really trying to make sure that we are moving this process forward, because the city and the department suffers substantial harm when this process does not move forward in our ability to meet our timeliness requirements and expend dollars and get contracts executed. They worked very hard to get as many people on the CWAC to come to these meetings, and I don't know how many you're saying 2, I don't know that for sure, but that whoever they were able to get to come is who they finally moved forward with.
So I'm concerned about that, and I think if it's only 2 people making recommendations for $3 million or more, I think it should be brought to our attention, my colleagues' attention, that we only got 2. The advisory committee, they are, do we appoint them?
Yes, there's
Okay.
11 members, 9 are appointed, 1 for each city council representative, and then 2 from the mayor.
So can you give all of us a list of who representing our ward so that we can see if our member is one of the members that's not being present, and if they not attending the meetings? I think it's so important that we,
Point of information. Do you know if they have to have quorum to make a decision?
Our guidance has been, it's not a multiple member body like this body, so they're not subject to the Open Meetings Act. They don't have quorum requirements. So it's a little bit different than your typical multiple member body.
good point of information, Councilman Pfeiffer. I appreciate that. I owe you $2 for that.
You can't get a buy.
That is very concerning to me that it might be only 2 members that's been to bring recommendation to this council for millions of dollars that's going to affect the city of Flint, because we wasn't aware that there's only 2 or 4 members, or we may not even be aware of vacancies. I don't know. I just don't know who. And I think one of my colleagues requested for the how many member bodies we have in the city of Flint and who serve on them, so we could see. Let me ask you this. In that meeting, do you guys have minutes of that meeting that we can review?
I know there's a summary of recommendations that are provided with, I think, some explanations of, some notes for different recommendations and support for those. I don't think that there is a set of minutes per se, like you would see from the Planning Commission or this body, but I do know that there's a summary of the recommendations with some notes on why different recommendations were made.
I think that's so important that they have minutes when they dealing with millions of dollars and you having a meeting to discuss. Is it federal? It's federal dollars, right?
They are,
Yeah.
yep.
So I'm not comfortable with that piece right there. But I hear what you're saying. You guys got to move forward because y'all trying to meet deadlines. It got to come before city council. So we have to look at these recommendations of 2 people allegedly that attended the meeting. Do they sign in when they come to a meeting?
I believe so. And let me just say that there were some conversations about when we were trying to get the meeting scheduled about the need for, some additional representatives that needed to be appointed. I believe that there's some vacancies by some members of this body that need to be appointed, as well as some of the members that weren't participating. And that was discussed as part of the CWAC appointment process. And I understand that there was some work that was happening at the council level, council staff level, to work with council members to try and get appointments made. I saw one coming, I think, Monday night for the 9th Ward, but I haven't seen any others. So I 100% agree with you. I think it needs to be fully constituted. I think that you as a body need to have representatives that take this work seriously and will show up. But I also know that we do need to move forward because we cannot, afford to wait for appointments to be made or people to show up or not show up. And so we did. We actually moved forward. So if it was 2, I trust what you're saying. I don't actually know that. But I do know that we were working and had conversations with staff to try and get some appointments made. And as a body, I would encourage all of you to make those appointments if you have vacancies. I'll provide you with the list, and if you have vacancies or your people were not people that showed up to that CWAC meeting, then I would encourage you to replace them and appoint someone that will participate.
Do you know who chair those citywide advisory committee? Because I can't imagine just 2 people in a meeting. Who the chairperson?
I don't know. I don't know that they are a formal group with bylaws and a chair established. And I do know, as I said, they're not subject to open meetings, so I don't think that it was something that required a quorum. I don't know for sure if they have a chair or not established.
Okay, I want to change to the Parks and Recreation. As you are aware, you do know I've been maintaining Dewey Park since like 2015, right?
I am aware.
With no money from the city of Flint whatsoever, and this happened up under the emergency manager. I just cut it Saturday. Had I not been, well, I'm not saying it would have not been cut through contractors, but since probably 2014, I've been mowing free of charge with my own money and equipment, Dewey Park. That's a kind of big park. It ain't small, but I don't have a problem doing it. But do you guys have a capital improvement plan for the parks?
There's a master plan for the parks, which includes a component for capital improvements, but there's not a capital improvement budget for the parks per se that's been adopted with funding identified. There is a component of the master plan, the parks master plan, that does identify, some improvements that are needed, but that was something that was actually under discussion a couple years ago with some philanthropic partners, and it has never been developed to the point where there is a capital improvement plan, which parks are going to be focused on first, where we're moving forward, what needs to be done in the parks. There's a level of assessment that has been done, but the actual capital improvement plan with financing and budgeting money for it, there's not for the parks.
Just think, I've been keeping that park up almost 10 years. Had I been getting paid, I probably could retire, but I'm good on that. Listen, we having a problem with the parks, and I want to bring this to your radar. So since I've been maintaining Dewey Park, I wrote a grant to do the new tennis courts, solar lights, basketball courts. You guys did a partnership to put the playground equipment in the pavilion. So there's been a lot of extra amenities added into the park outside of, had I not been maintaining. So I am kind of bragging a little bit because that's some accomplishments. But we having problems with people driving in the park, using them as parking lots in the grass while, we got kids up there playing, and I know Councilman Dr. Lewis has done talked about in her park, I'm not sure other parks, but people are actually using the grass with the playground area as a parking lot versus the parking lot. So we having I like the high traffic that Dewey Park and other parks is getting now that we got new playgrounds. And I think up under Karen Weaver, there was some funding brought in during the water crisis to help improve the parks. So I think she probably got about 10, 12 parks with new playground equipment. So it's attracting people to want to utilize the parks. Is there a possibility that you could get a wish list for the council with the parks? I know we still need a pavilion roof at where the concerts used to be at Dewey Park. If we gave you a wish list for what we would like to see in our parks, because I have Ophelia Bonner Park, Dewey Park, and River Park, I think over there on Webster Road. I probably got, Kersley, is that Rolling Wood Park? Rolling Wood Park. I ain't got Kersley now, do I? Oh, Lord. Anyways, is there a possibility that we could give you a wish list of some capital improvements that need to take place in our parks now that we got ARPA dollars, if it's eligible? Because what I want to see is when we use the ARPA dollars, I want to see a return for our money. So seeing a return for our money, if we could use some of those dollars to improve our parks, that could be a return because it's long term versus us just giving some money. And I'm not against giving people money for programming that's going to last 6 weeks or 8 weeks, but if it's an opportunity for us to do capital improvement or even take out some old, outdated, hazardous playground equipment that's in parts that need to be removed, is there a possibility that we can do that?
I think you should do that. I think it's, it's likely that there's a lot of agreement with what you submit to us versus what we know exists because we're out in the parks too, our staff person, and working closely with other adopters and other organizations, Genesee County Parks and Keep Genesee County Beautiful. There is a lot of work that's been done to identify the needs of the different parks, but I would love to get a list from all of you for parks that are in your wards, identifying what you and your residents, and that's actually what we try to do with our neighborhood planning initiative when we're identifying needs, working with certain neighborhood organizations. We're looking at all of the assets and opportunities in their areas. And so we have actually done some of that work, and so I'd love to see if it agrees with what you believe, needs to happen in the parks that are in your ward or whomever. And also, if you have identified needs for bollards or barriers or something, I know that my staff are aware of some of those issues as well. I've heard about Cook Park. I've heard about other parks that, people are driving, in the park, which is not allowed. And obviously, it's difficult to enforce that. So bollards have been kind of the way that we've addressed it in the past. And if there are other parks that need that, where that's happening, I have no problem. If you want
Ms.
to give me a
Wilcox, you
list.
said bollards, you're talking about the
Bollards.
the wool
Bollards.
ballers?
Bollards.
Oh,
Bollards,
bollards.
the barriers that get
Yeah.
put up like cement barriers
Okay.
at like the entrance to parks to prevent people from driving into the park.
They have them at Max Brandon Park?
Yeah, Max Brandon has them.
They also used at Ballinger Park, which is a private park, it's not a city park, and they mow their own.
Yeah.
We had the same problem with the basketballers. And what they put up, because they would drive down to the courts, there was wooden blocks, and then they're spiked like that. And they put it all the way around, and it stopped the people from driving on the grass. And I don't think it's, it's not going to be as expensive if we're using wrought iron or something, but those wood blocks that are about this, and they drive them in, and it stopped them because they drove right up to the courts.
Because,
I'd be happy to get that information for parks in your wards where you're experiencing problems, and also for capital improvements that you'd like to see made. But I'm just saying, we do have a list of some of those things. I'd be interested to see where they intersect.
so, just recently, I've been working with a group, the Sylvester Bloom Empowerment Center, and a foundation, I don't really want to put their names out here. Now, we had a meeting earlier today. They have agreed to invest $85,000 into redoing a basketball court, and it's going to be a multi-purpose court, volleyball. What's the soccer field or whatever? It's going to be a multi-purpose court, and it's a $100,000 project. We short $15,000. Is there an opportunity for us to look into, I don't know if you have unspent community development block grant dollars. Do you have a list of how much unspent community development block grant dollars you guys have not spent that you might have awarded contracts to people? And do you know what that number is?
I don't believe we have very many unspent dollars right now. There are a number of, because of the delays in the contracts over 2021 and 21-22, there are a number of agencies and organizations that have existing contracts that, have yet to be spent. But in terms of unencumbered dollars or unencumbered balances to be able to award, I think that number is relatively small. I don't have a number offhand right now to say, but I don't think there's very many unspent dollars. To your first question, absolutely. Can we have a conversation about where we can identify some money? I mean, there are opportunities. CDBG certainly is one, and we have contracts awarded, for parks improvements in some cases that we could take a look at to see if they are viable and they're going to move forward, similar to the conversation we just had about Haskell, right? But also Parks Millage, for a relatively small amount of money, and Parks Millage, I understand, is a small amount of money in and of itself, and we try to stretch that as far as we can. But if we're able to leverage another $85,000 or another $100,000, it might make sense for us to use a portion of those Parks Millage money Parks Millage funds to make some of those improvements.
Okay.
We're also very aggressive and pretty successful at seeking grants from other funding sources and other partners. So I understand this is a grant, and you're needing to leverage that, but we're pretty good at that, too. So I'm happy to have that conversation, and I think the chances are good. Obviously, it's something that would come, potentially before this body, but I think the chances are good that we could probably identify a relatively small amount of money to leverage a larger amount.
Okay, and I'm going to wrap up with this. I'm going to be coming to you. Don't get mad at me, because don't take it personal, but it's near and dear to my heart. Ophelia Bonner Park, which was a historical park that Ophelia Bonner did a lot of work in the city of Flint. Is you familiar with who that is?
With,
Ophelia Bonner.
I'm not actually.
Okay. She was a great lady. Did a lot of wonderful things. She lived on Lamita in North. They named Jefferson Park. I don't think it was called Jefferson Park. I forgot the name of it. Brain freeze. But they named the park after Ophelia Bonner Park, who did a lot of wonderful things. And when I thought about that park and went over there and looked at it, Vera Rising, the late Vera Rising, who was a state rep, county commissioner, that done a lot of great work. She used to do annual picnics at the park. They used to have concerts down in the park. And when you look at it now, it's so devastating. You got Audrey's Place. They use the park to go through to grocery stores, but the park is devastating with overgrown trees. It's an area that just need to be cleaned up. I would like to see some money earmarked that we can do a deep clean in that park so that we can try to bring it back, because that's just something that's near and dear to my heart and to a lot of people in this community. I think about the late Ernestine Towns that done a lot of great work over there in that area. These people have died on. Catherine Price. I think about these people who helped me to where I'm at today, here now. And it's because of them why I'm here and able to sit behind the seat. And now that I'm behind on this side, I want to do what I can to honor their legacy and the hard work that they done in the past. And a lot of times people paved the way for us, and we get here and we forget, and then we look at stuff that they worked so hard to do, and then we look back and it's like, oh, I can't believe this. They'll be turning in their grave if they saw how that park looked. And I know we just put a new playground equipment out. Appreciate that. But I want to try to revise that area and bring it back to life. So don't take it personal, but I do want to see some more attention towards Ophelia Bonner Park, and that's it. Thank you so much for being here today.
Are you done,
I
Councilman
made a
Murphy?
note of that.
Councilwoman Priestley, would you like the floor?
Sure.
You have the floor.
I don't have a lot because most of my questions have already been answered. I want to look at the Park and Recreation Fund a little bit. Do you know what, there's $213,000 that is transferred into that account. Do you happen to know what that's from?
I believe it's millage money that is transferred actually into the account.
Okay, because it says property taxes of $453,000, some state revenue, minimal interest minimal, other revenue. Are we charging fees to use parks at all?
There are some fees that are charged for rental of parks or pavilions.
Pavilions.
Yes, it's nominal. I think it's $25, but yes,
Okay.
there are some fees that are charged.
Yeah, there's $1,873 for other income, other revenue, but then there's transfer in of $213,000. But you think that's from general fund property tax?
It's actually, that's the actual millage amount. So the only funding, really, the revenue for parks comes from the millage that's assessed. So.
Well, this is why I'm questioning, because it's, because there's property taxes listed on this income of $453,000, and then transfer in of $213,000. And it's not numbered, the pages on this. It's towards the back of the budget.
Oh,
It's-
okay, in
It's
the,
at the, yeah, it's behind the position summary.
I'm sorry, I was looking on a different page. So you're
That's all right.
looking, yes, where it has the 23-24 proposed budget, property taxes, and you're looking at FY '20,
I was looking at 25, 26, too.
okay, so
All
FY
right,
'22, '23 does not have a transfer in.
You're right, and I was actually looking in the same column as what we're looking at in the front part, so that is my mistake. I didn't look across the top. Okay, so we'll forget that question then, okay?
Okay.
So we're anticipating $417,000 in park revenue.
Correct.
Yeah,
And that
okay.
is largely due, I think I said earlier, due to the increase in property taxes. Yes.
Right. Okay. We have one employee for the park services.
We do,
Okay, and that's actually funded out of that fund.
yes.
And then the supplies and operating expenses, there's a lot of extra stuff in there. I know that we have a grant from the Mott Foundation for $500,000, am I correct about that money? To mow the parks.
Yeah, that's with the agreement with Genesee County Parks for, out of the city's 70 parks for the portion that they cover, which is, they don't cover all of the city parks. So that $500,000 goes to Genesee County from a grant from CS Mott to
Okay.
mow them. But there are still some obligations that the city has for mowing other parks, and I don't have that list with me tonight. I meant to bring it, of which ones we are responsible for. And that is the primary portion, that's the biggest portion of supplies and operating expenses, is actually mowing of the park.
And then we have to add the increase. Are we mowing it, or are we contracting
We
those out?
contract them.
Okay,
So that's a big chunk of that parks person's time. I mean, obviously, we do fundraising and others, but that parks person is responsible for managing those contracts, executing them, working with purchasing to secure vendors if it's more than, if it's past past the contract timeframe. And then the bulk of those operating expenses are for those contracts.
okay. I'm going to stay on the parks for a minute, because you and I spoke before about the bollards, which I didn't know that's what they were called. I had to look it up. Bullard. Yeah, not Bullard. So the heavy-duty safety from Uline is $105 a piece. I don't know how many we would need to secure some of these parks that people can drive on, but I think it's something that we really need to look heavily at, using the ARPA dollars for.
Point of information.
What's your point of information?
Are you aware that that $105 is only the sleeve, it's not the concrete and the actual internal portions
Thank you
of that?
very much. No, I did not know that. Okay, well, we need to do something. I mean, I just looked at that was what that was. So I'm interested in what kind of pricing we need, how many we need for each park. I know that in the 6th Ward, there is a park that has had some driving on. And Cook Park has had cars driving over the rugby field, which is a jewel in this town that is not well known. We have one of the oldest rugby clubs in the country here in Flint, and that's where they have their games. So, and they're going out and fixing those. So I think that that's something that we need to look at, those parks that have the major problems, and at least see what kind of ARPA dollars we need to do that, whether they are wooden posts driven into the ground, which would eventually rot, or do these bollards with the cement posts and the cover, and how much it would cost.
Yeah, that's typically what we do, and I'm sorry, I don't have the pricing. It sounds like maybe Councilman Pfeiffer does. I don't have the pricing for those right now, but I know we have done them, and so I can provide that. And then, as I said to Councilman Murphy, if you have parks that you've identified that have those problems, if you provide, I would guess that our parks person, and also I have a vacancy, that position is actually vacant right now. So our lead planner is functioning as both. He's doing some of that work, and we're trying to get that position filled. So just be knowledgeable about that, because that impacts the ability to get things done. But we can certainly get that information. If you can provide the names of parks that need that, I would bet that Roy probably already knows that. But we'd be, happy to look at that and prioritize that, and just maybe even look for other sources of funding to help with that to the degree that we can. So yeah, just identify your parks where those needs where those items are needed, and then I can also give you the estimate for where we've done that in other parks in the city.
Okay, I only know of Cook Park, so that's the only one who I've had a complaint about. But if the public knows of any other park in the ward that might need those, please contact me, and I will be glad to follow up with that, because this is something that, there's not very many parks in my ward, and I do believe you have Kearsley and have had Kearsley Park. Kearsley's in yours? Okay,
Thank you very much.
well, good.
I don't need no more.
So, I don't hear of anything going on in Kearsley, because
And there
Yeah.
are needs I've heard recently from people too about
Camping.
Kearsley Park and some additional needs, so that's already
Right.
on my list. But, I mean, to have a very comprehensive list from this body, I think would be helpful, so.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
You're right.
And I'd like to see something more for the Fourth Ward children. In my neighborhood, there's a small little corner park. It has nothing for the older kids. It has a couple of picnic tables and some bouncy horses and a couple of swings and a slide, and that's about it. So, but the other thing that I had was, I went out of my mind here. Oh, fee schedules. When was the last time the fees have increased for like building inspections and things?
I believe, they're assessed every year when the master fee schedule is adopted as part of the budget.
Okay.
I don't believe that they've been increased since we contracted out rental inspections, which I can't remember the year. I think it was 2000, maybe 13. But that is not to say that they need to be increased or not, because that is something, like, we discuss it every year internally to make sure that, we are charging appropriately, because technically fees for inspections and permits should be money in, money out. That's what should fund our operations, and there should be kind of a net, a net zero approach to that. So we haven't really had an issue, because we do have a fund balance in building and safety inspections, but we are also kind of ramping up. Part of the reason for the fund balance is that there were a lot of permit and inspection fees generated from some of the GM plant work, the commercial construction that was done. So you'll see that that's actually decreasing. Our fund balance is decreasing because of that. So there might be a need to assess it, but at this point, we don't believe that there's a need to increase our, for the most part. There is a proposed change, I think, in this year's master fee schedule for vacant property registration, which is a new fee. But for the most part, we don't really believe that there's a need to increase property inspection or permitting fees generally, and I think the public would probably agree with us.
And the master fee schedule's adopted with the budget? And I haven't seen a master fee schedule in relationship to our budget yet.
I think that's a question for I know that they present it, with the budget, and typically that's when it's adopted, but that's handled through the finance
Okay.
department. Every department has an opportunity to look at the fees that are part of their department's master fee schedule, but the overall master fee schedule is handled through finance.
Okay. Like I said, most of my questions were answered earlier, so I thank you very much. It sounds like you feel that your budget is fair, and, yeah, you'd like money, but understand the realities.
I mean, generally, I think everybody wants more money, but, you know, the realities are, fiscally, the city has some severe financial constraints, and we're trying to operate within a fair budget.
I know that we have some tough decisions to make, and,
So I'd prefer you not cut it.
I don't know.
Let me say that.
If it means losing a park position that is vacant, yeah, I really want somebody in the parks, because I
Yeah,
feel it's
I
very
would imagine
important.
you don't want to lose a vacant position that's that important. That's an important position, and that has a lot of value to the city when it's filled. And right now, even though it's not filled, you know, we're continuing to try and do some of that work, but it's not able to be done to the same extent as someone dedicated to that. So I think it's extremely important to the city. As I said in the very beginning, I really support parks. I really support outdoor opportunities. I really support recreation opportunities. I appreciate all of your comments about needs in parks. That's something that is a huge priority for planning and development. So having that staff, it's just a matter of trying to get the position filled at this point. We're having difficulty filling positions. The city's wages are not competitive, and there is nationwide, there's difficulty finding positions. So we've gone through many interviews and, you know, the interview process and postings, and we're still struggling to get these positions filled, but I wouldn't want to lose it for that reason, because that impacts us all.
It's the quality of life. It's a
Yeah.
quality of life issue. I'm going to piggyback on what Mr. Pfeiffer mentioned about the marijuana fees. Did you have any part of developing how much we anticipated to receiving in revenue from the state, or?
We are limited by the fees, the application fees and the licensing fees we can charge, we're limited by the state. So at the time we were developing, you know, the marijuana ordinance, there was a recognition that the city was really getting the short end of the stick with the fees that we can capture. And as I said to Councilman Pfeiffer, it's really the state that benefits first, and then the county, and then the city. And so we were part, yes, I was part of that discussion, and our determination was we need to charge the maximum that we can, that we're allowed to by law, because it is not a revenue generator. That portion is not a revenue generator for us. And
Is
so
that an annual fee?
it's an annual fee, and every year applicants are required to submit it again for their relicensure and to gain their attestation from the clerk's office prior to submitting it for state license.
I know that in the revenue sharing portion, for what other word it's called, of the marijuana
Yeah.
sales tax or whatever fees are charged, Burton received a lot more than Flint. Do you know how many dispensaries we have now compared to what's in Burton? Do you have any idea? I mean, I know this is off the wall, I'm just trying to figure out.
That's the chart that I was looking for, because I meant to bring it with me and I forgot. You know, when we brought all the licenses back to city council, I believe, and I can provide you with the exact number, and I did provide it actually, I think, to all of you in an email not too long ago that Councilman Murphy requested. I think it's 14. And that includes grandfathered facilities and new facilities that were recently licensed by you. But that does not include any pending applications and there's no more pending applications that Planning Commission has to review that will be then brought to City Council. I mean, that group of licenses that you thankfully approved for planning and development, that group is done. But as licenses are approved by the Planning Commission, they will be brought to you immediately, just like a rezoning. After Planning Commission makes a recommendation, we will bring them to you. So when I'm talking about, I think 14, and I will verify that, that does not include anything that's pending to go before Planning Commission. And I believe that the figure, you know, the total number of active licenses and open facilities and pending applications is somewhere around 30. But I think the question might be better asked to the law department about how that, because I know that Joanne Gurley did a really good job of breaking that down, how the state determined, what that revenue sharing amount was and how it was determined, to explain the difference between why Burton received X and the city received $87,000, whatever it was. She did a good breakdown of that, and we don't have any control over that at all.
Yeah, I didn't think you did. It's just, like, from my house, within a half a mile, there's at least, I believe there's 3 in Burton and 1 in Flint, within a half mile. So, yeah. All right, those were my questions that I had at this point. Definitely, by the way, I did speak to Ernst & Young and Lottie and Mr. Whittigan about getting money for parks in regards specifically for the bollards. And can see, and I was told there's lots of funding sources, so let's see what we can do and
Yeah.
work together and get those in maybe by the end of the year or in the spring.
And I would just reiterate my point to Councilman Pfeiffer earlier, when the marijuana ordinance, after the zoning code ordinance is adopted, and we bring the marijuana ordinance forward for some modifications, that I think is your opportunity to discuss some of those opportunities to look at what you might like to see different in the permanent marijuana ordinance to address maybe some concerns that you have that maybe the previous council didn't.
Well, thank you very much.
Are you done?
I am.
Thank you.
Point of information.
What's your point of information?
I am sending the list to all of my colleagues on all the marijuana dispensaries. You sent it to me a while ago. So I just forwarded it to everybody. So y'all should have it in y'all email.
Thank you. Councilwoman Winfrey Carter, would you like the floor?
Yes, thank you. I just have maybe one question. I've been listening. Ms. Wilcox, through you, Madam Chair, to Ms. Wilcox. Ms. Wilcox, can you just refresh my memory? Did we earmark some money for maybe the Smith Village properties
No.
some time ago?
Like 3 years ago, maybe, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, when we finally finished, completing those properties. There hasn't been, luckily, when we were able to sell the last property, we haven't allocated any money. Now, there was a conversation at one point, if I think I know where you're going.
Yes, you know where I'm going, right?
There was a conversation with city council, working, and again, no federal dollars, which no federal dollars, no
Yeah,
more federal dollars
right.
can be allocated to personal homes. I mean, at this point, many of these homes were sold, 10 years ago, and they've been occupied for 7 or 10 years. So I think you were talking about general funds. So there was a conversation with the previous council, not this council, about a specific homeowner in Smith Village
Right.
that had some concerns with some noises and shaking that occurred when her, I think, sump pump
Yes.
turned on, and she could hear it in her dining room. So we had our inspectors go out there and do an inspection. She had a plumber come and look at it too, and it was determined internally that there was nothing code-wise that was done improperly, but there was a thought that there was kind of a unique valve connection. The joints were, it was a 90-degree turn, and when the water pressure was such, it made a large noise. And so you guys had, council then, had made a recommendation to pay her. There was never money allocated for that. So we have no funds allocated for Ms. Michael. As I've shared with her, we would need to do a budget amendment to actually allocate some dollars for this. And so we need to, I had a conversation with the previous city attorney about the ability to do this. I need to make sure that I have the conversation with the current city attorney that we can actually allocate dollars, general fund dollars, to pay for to pay for repairs on a specific individual homeowner's house. And that's something that I said I will do. And then we would need to do a budget amendment to actually allocate dollars for that, because we do not have money in our budget to pay for that at this point.
So have you started that process of
I
doing
have
what
not had a
you-
conversation with the new city attorney yet, but
Okay.
I am going to have it.
Okay. And can you please, after you have that conversation, can you please, just let me know the status and everything?
Sure.
Because, she's been complaining about this since she moved into that house in 2016. And, we got to do better. We got to do better. And if it's something that, the city, when she moved in, she was hearing this noise. And I guess had been calling and calling. I don't know. But I inherited when I got elected, to take care of this. And it's been 4 years now
Yeah,
that we've been dealing with this.
I hear you, and I understand that. I think the issue is that there was no money allocated for planning and development to fix it from out of our money. So that was the first issue. The second thing is, I don't believe planning, and I know you're saying now that you've been hearing about it for 4 years, I don't believe planning and development was aware of it when she first moved in the house. We became aware of it a couple years after she lived in the house. And so there's kind of an issue with that too, when there are people, who move, at some point homeowners become responsible for their own homeowner kind of issues. And the homes were sold as is, which was all something that was communicated to all home buyers. So that, that's part of the discussion too.
Yeah.
But I do know that you, city council, recommended that planning and development pay for this individual homeowner's repairs despite, not having, really kind of verification from our inspectors that it was it was a defect, right? But the issue is money. I mean, we do not have money in our budget to do that, so that needs to happen first. And first, I need to verify that the current city attorney is actually okay with that course of direction.
Okay. Well, that's something we need to work on because she's been complaining. I mean, Councilwoman Burns, she was calling the office every day when you were in the mayor's office. So,
And that's Michael's.
And
is
we've
his name.
actually talked about it.
Yeah, we have.
Councilwoman Burns, and what I'm saying is exactly, the status of what
Did we
needs
ever
to
get a
happen.
price on how much?
yeah, didn't you get a price at one
I
point?
think we got an estimate, and, but the estimate was generated, this was from, I think, our plumbing and mechanical inspector, so it wasn't a quote per se where someone would actually come out and, do the work. This was from our inspector. So I think we do. I don't want to say right now what I remember for sure because I don't know that that's accurate. It might be my faulty memory, but I think there was an estimate that was provided by our plumbing and mechanical inspector.
Okay.
Councilman Winfrey Carter, can you send Suzanne an email so that it's in her email so that we have got like a thread to make sure
Right.
that we're, up to date? Because Ms. Constance Michaels periodically drops into city council. And we need to make sure that we're still, working towards a goal to get her issue taken care of.
And she periodically calls me too. And the last
Right.
time I talked to her, I shared with her, was a few weeks ago, I shared with her that I needed to have a conversation with the new city attorney, and that I would do that, and then we needed to do a budget amendment because we would have to identify
Okay.
funding, and it would take a little bit of time, and I
So
haven't talked to her since then.
Can you make it a priority to have that conversation with
Sure.
Attorney Kim, and so that we can get back on it? Because it's budget time, so we need to at least, make sure that you have that so that that problem can be taken care of.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think that's it for me.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Winfrey Carter. And it is 7:14, so I'm going to be real quick because my colleagues have asked some very good questions. I appreciate you being here, Suzanne. I'm going to start with, and we've touched on the marijuana dispensaries. I'm not against marijuana at all, and I'm not against, the alcohol. But when we look at, is it really beneficial, if you're saying it's a big part of your hours work for your department, what would be your recommendation if you could fix the marijuana because it's taken a lot of work hours. What would you like?
That's a tough question, because the man-hours that are associated with it are really related to the administrative burden that the licensing process puts on it. So, I mean, part of it was generated initially when, initially the marijuana ordinance, when it was put forward, was intended to be a first come, first served process. And it was changed by, and Councilwoman Winfrey Carter will probably remember this, it was changed during the whole year-and-a-half discussion on marijuana to be a merit-based process, and so then there was a rubric that had to be developed in order for applications to be reviewed instead of on first-come, first-served basis, based upon the merits of their application, where there was a committee that was established, and there was a whole process, and a process of different departments being involved and being part of that merit, and that delayed that significantly. So that's part of, that created some of the backlog that exists to really kind of, get that done. We're done now with all of the applicants, because when the permanent recreational ordinance was put in place, it removed, that rubric. It removed that metric for reviewing applications. And so now it is first come, first served. But that put us behind. But it's hard to say what, honestly, it would be more staff, because we don't really have any flexibility in what we have to do. The ordinance is what it is, the state law is what it is, and either we limit the number of, and I'm not saying to do that because that's not my decision, we could make a recommendation, but either we limit the number of establishments, put a cap on them, again, so that we can get to the point where we're not reviewing applications anymore.
So that we're maintaining, so
And
you
so
can
that
use
we
those.
can then, because what's happening is all of the due diligence associated with, reviewing these license applications, going through that process, involving other departments, which includes police, fire, building and safety inspections, treasury, the law office, they are all involved in that process too. And so there's no way that a $5,000 license pays, for everybody's time
It's
that's
not
involved in that
financially
process.
beneficial.
Because then it goes to the planning commission, who has to review it, and then if a decision is disagreed with, sometimes there's a zoning board of appeals discussion. So it's just a huge administrative burden that is really not compensated by the fees we're actually able to charge. We cannot charge more than we do. So it's either hiring more staff, to Councilman Pfeiffer's point, at a loss, because we're not able to capture that revenue unless we start seeing, some significant increases in the amount of state shared revenue that comes. But we certainly can't capture it just from the licenses that come through. So, it's more staff thinking about, really thinking seriously about how many marijuana establishments, the city can sustain as part of our economic development strategy. I'm not against marijuana either. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be part of our economic development strategy, but I'm in favor of a diverse economic development strategy. And so I think that's something to think about when you actually get that opportunity to look at the ordinance again, is, what makes sense for a city of this size.
Councilman Farber, did you want to chime in? You were nodding your head.
No, I was just motioning that we probably need to cap it.
I think we do need to look at that, especially if it's not financially beneficial. And it does go through all those departments. You're correct. I'm going to move on to building safety and permits in that department. You said there's a surplus. Was that what you said?
There's a fund balance, yes.
A fund balance, okay, it's fund balance. Approximately how much is that fund balance?
I think it's approximately 2 million something.
Now, me and Jim Duran, before we did a plan there, I know that they were taking in quite a considerable amount of money there.
I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
Oh, no, when we were there, building and permits was taking in quite a bit of money at the time, which was surprising to me. And I believe in 1 month, I logged $1 million that they took in.
I think I referenced that. That was actually during part of, you know, the work that was being done at the GM plants. There was some big commercial projects and that's part of the reason the fund balance has been decreasing, because there's not those huge commercial projects. So when GM was actually, you know, expanding its operation and making modifications, those permit and inspection fees were substantial.
They were great, and they were coming in per month.
Yep.
And in that fund balance, because we had the library, we had the cultural center projects,
Yeah.
GM, and then other projects, so monies that were coming in were over, I mean, $1 million a month. And I was really concerned at our intake process, but that's another issue. So when Councilwoman Priestley asked you about the permit fees, were they are they, and I was doing a couple other things up here, do you feel that they're comparable to other municipalities?
I do.
And you said, Adam, did you get the year that they were increased?
I think it was 2013.
So about 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's really, there hasn't been a comprehensive assessment, and there probably needs to be now, because we're doing rental inspections again.
And how much are you charging for rental inspections?
I think I think it's $250.
Per year?
Mm-hmm. And there's different fees for re-inspections, et cetera.
Okay.
And we're talking about doing some things, like I said, vacant property registrations, and so really trying to kind of move the needle on enforcement.
And how many people do you have in rental inspections?
There are 2 right now.
I didn't think you had
there's
any
1 right
for a
now.
while, did you?
No, we had 0.
Right.
So that was a program, you know, once the ordinance was adopted, because there was a lawsuit that really prevented us from doing rental inspections for several years. Once the ordinance was adopted, then we were able to hire rental inspectors. And I said there are 2 positions. There's actually, 1 vacancy right now. So we have 1 current inspector, and we're trying to fill the second position. And it was vacated due to a promotional opportunity for the other inspector. So we think we'll be able to fill it.
Okay. And that department, I don't think people realize how important it is.
Mhm.
Because when you're talking, I think that works hand in hand with economic development, because when they're coming in to get something done, a new business, they have to go through your department.
They do.
With Glenda, everything.
Mhm.
And it's really important, because that's their first take on the city of Flint and how we do business, your department. I want to talk about the fire and fund.
Fire escrow?
Yes.
Okay.
How much is in that account?
I think it's, if it's not $2 million, it's close to $2 million.
And with the fire and safety fund, there's $2 million in there. And for people who understand, when your home burns down or catches fire, the fire and safety fund, a portion of, before the insurance company, a portion goes to the city. And the city holds that money in the fire and safety fund account. And that money is in that account if the building has to be knocked down, so that the city can make sure that they take care of that if it's a burnt out structure. If it's not burnt out, or I'm sorry, if the structure is rebuilt and the homeowner does, then that money is supposed to go back, correct?
Yeah.
How do we end up with a $2 million balance?
Because there's a lot of homes that have not been demolished, so it's
Okay.
sitting there because the homeowner, the insured party, it goes to the insured party or the contractor. So if they haven't actually taken the steps to demolish the home, let's say they had a fire, they walked away. We can't, it's property specific, so it's only available for that home. So we can't distribute it to anyone but that property owner or the insured party or the contractor that's demolished it. So if it wasn't demolished, it's sitting there because there's no one else for it to go to. Now, we've talked internally about, maybe some state legislation that needs to change for fire escrow so that municipalities can actually use it for demolition on a broader scale. But there's some insurance laws right now that prohibit us from doing that except for that specific property. So there really are some laws that we need to change. I've spoken to the mayor about it. I think it's a viable, option to start having some conversations with legislators so that Flint, the city of Flint, and other municipalities, I'm sure would be in support of it too, could use these fire escrow funds that can only be used on houses that may or may not ever, be knocked down, or they're taken down by the land bank or whatever. So I think there's some conversations that need to happen that could actually allow the city a little bit more flexibility in using its fire escrow.
Point of information.
Go ahead. I was just getting ready to talk, but I seen you. Go ahead, Councilman Pfeiffer.
Have we cross-referenced that list to land bank houses and see if those funds are freed up?
We've actually had, so here's the issue. The fire escrow is relatively a small amount, so it's typically not an amount that will demolish an entire structure. So there might be a couple $1,000s, in fire escrow remaining on a structure. So we actually have worked with the land bank in the past to allow them access, for some properties, allow them access to those fire escrow funds. So if they're demolishing a house and maybe they have other leveraging funds, maybe they have CDBG or hardest hit funds or something, and they could use, well, actually hardest hit, they couldn't actually use that with fire escrow. So it actually has to be an amount that will allow them to tear down the entire property. And in the cases where that did happen and it made sense, we've entered into cooperative agreements with them where we allowed them access to those fire escrow funds. They tore down the house and then we actually paid them the fire escrow money. That is not to say that we shouldn't continue that exercise because I'm sure that there are still properties, but when I looked I looked at the list, a lot of them were very small amounts available on a property that you can't demolish a house for that amount. So it's just sitting there.
So the average, to my understanding, once a home is burnt out, we don't worry about asbestos at that point.
Depending on the extent of the fire damage.
Right, for a residential home. I'm not talking about like a commercial. So
Yeah.
we're looking, I believe, with the basement, I think the average price now is about $16,500 for a demo. I believe that's like in that range. So how do you, because I think about burnouts in some of these places in parts of Flint. How are you selecting, is your department actively saying, hey, we've got money from this fund, from the fire fund, let's get this home tore down? Are we making sure that we're staying on top of that?
We work with the land, so the hardest hit was kind of a different proposition, but we do work closely with the land bank on the money that we allocate through Community Development Block Grant, and we actually work to identify the properties and look at fire escrow too, to see if there are some, properties that do have fire escrow funds available. But we do work to help prioritize the properties that the land bank uses our CDBG dollars for to tear down, because I look at it as it's the city's money. And so we need to have, so we use it for some of our priority projects, like Clark Commons. We look at other factors too. If the land bank has been successful at leveraging other funds, which they are, EPA dollars or something, and it makes sense to tear down a commercial property that's going to be very expensive. That's how we were able to tear down, oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought, the trailer park, on the east side in your area. Pardon me? Yeah, I forget the name of it. Kirkwood, yes. And other, Brown's Funeral Home, others, we leverage dollars. So if there's situations like that, I guess I'm just saying, we do work very closely with the land bank to try and prioritize that. The other thing to remember is the only source of money that has been available for commercial demolitions is CDBG. So we really try to prioritize CDBG dollars for commercial structures, and so sometimes it's large scale, the apartment complex on the corner on Lapeer Road, for example, sometimes it's large scale projects like that where they make a big impact, at that time, but you don't see that impact in neighborhoods over, the area of the city, because it's a relatively small amount. From CDBG, we've allocated in the past $700,000. That's not a lot of money. And we're spending a lot of it on commercial projects. But do we work with the land bank? Yes.
Yeah, and that's important, working with the land bank, because there was a project that was on Dort Highway, and within 30 days, when we create partnerships, it seems to it works better. And this project was right behind the Rite Aid on Court and Dort Highway. But when it becomes environmental, they move a lot quicker and they have more dollars.
Yep.
And so they identified it as being an environmental hazard.
Yes.
And it moved, I've never seen it move that quick. I think it spun my head around, how quick it moved. But they got it taken care of. So I know partnering with the land bank and making sure leverage dollars has been one of the big words. Make sure we're leveraging dollars so that not only the city is paying for, but getting the county and then also the federal government. I think that's something we need to make sure we're pursuing. And it seems like a lot of things get dropped because maybe your staffing levels, you're working, your department is stretched. I've worked with you. And I think it's hard when you're doing so much in your department, and everyone is. But that fire and safety fund has been a question for me, and I think for the community too. And I know that in the fourth ward, it'd be interesting to,
Point of information,
yes,
not to be cutting you off, but through you to
but,
Suzanne,
go ahead.
with the fire that Councilman Burns is talking about. I have a young lady that house did catch on fire and it was considered a total loss, but she got it rebuilt. And she's saying that the city is holding her money and they won't return it to her. So I don't know if you ever got that kind of,
I have gotten that. I've even gotten it
So I
with
wanted to see if
contractors
you
who
could
didn't
answer.
get their money.
why wouldn't they be able to get their money?
I'd have to know the individual circumstances, so if you want to, I mean, there are reasons, but it really varies upon, circumstance. So if you want to contact me, I'm happy to talk
I'll give
offline,
you
or
her.
give me that contact information.
Councilman, I would email Ms. Wilcox along with the city administrator, Clyde Edwards, at the same time.
Yeah.
Or if you want to, that way you've got them both on the same page, or if you want to give it to me, I'll shoot it to you, Suzanne, because I've had, and I've worked with that
And you-
before.
And send me too, if you have
Yeah.
other cases like that, because there are reasons, and we're happy to explain them.
To explain them.
But I just need to know the details. I can't speak to it tonight.
So, Councilman, if you want to give that to me, I'll get it to Suzanne and to the city administrator. Because I think I look at, when we talk about, I think we had a arsonist, a firebug in the fourth ward. And I look at Councilwoman Judy Priestley, like the corner of, and I don't even say the corner, you drive down Franklin, from Robert T. down to Davison. I don't know if someone just had some spare matches and a gallon of gasoline because they were busy over there. And I think that would be able to help in your area.
Blight control.
That would help. So if we could use those funds, like tear down, because a lot of those structures they were busy.
Well, that goes back to the point about them being restricted to specific addresses. So if you have addresses that you've identified, that you'd like to share with me, and we can look up to see if they actually have fire escrow on them, that's the first step. But if they don't have fire escrow, that's my point about trying to have some flexibility. some
When the money comes
legislation.
in, it should be attached to an address, am I correct?
It is, yes. Every single fire escrow that we have, every single fire escrow amount that we've received is attached to a property address, and we have that specific accounting for all of them.
Okay. Well, Councilman, and I'm going to be respectful, because we're 7:33, I want to stay within our time. If you want to get it to me, are you going to send it?
I'm just gonna send it.
Okay, make sure you get Mr. Edwards, that way, it stays on down the road moving. Because that is a serious question that people do have about that fire, that escrow fund. And
Yeah, we're
creating
happy to-
transparency, I think, benefits. This council, I feel, wants to be transparent, and I would like for us to continue for that as a council, to be transparent, and also with the administration, because it's the residents who have questions, and we need to be transparent to move everything forward. I think my last one is going to be Haskell. Is there a plan to revive Haskell? I know that Haskell is where PAL is out of. We had 2 issues with 2 different PAL programs in the past, but it technically, I believe in the charter, is a program that is underneath the police chief that he's over, and I believe Chief Green has a program that he's using for PAL. So is there a plan, or have you seen a plan for PAL over at Haskell? Because that building, I didn't realize how old it was, actually, but it's got some good bones to it. I mean, and I was like, so I'm like, we need this pool open over here so kids can swim, because I used to take my daughter there. They used to do the lock-ins where you stayed the night and you swam. They did arts and crafts. They have a kitchen. They have a full basement down there, you know, and not to mention the basketball court. So that is a great project that, have you seen the plans?
I have seen some plans, and if your question is there a plan to revitalize Haskell, I would say yes. I mean, in terms of is there a desire and a plan to work towards that? I don't believe the plans have been fully developed as to what will actually occur there in terms of programming and renovations, et cetera. But the goal is certainly to repurpose Haskell. It is a beautiful center. It's a historic, building. Bassett Park is a part.
Right next to it.
Yeah, and Bassett Park is part of that land, and there's a very active, more than one neighborhood association that we worked very closely with in our neighborhood planning division. That's how I know Ms. Bell, to develop a plan for the entire neighborhood, not just Haskell Center, but the entire neighborhood, including Haskell Center and Bassett Park. And so, yes, there is a plan that incorporates all of those elements, and there is definitely a desire to see Haskell remain an integral part of that neighborhood planning effort.
Yeah, and it's a gem, and I think that because a building is old, doesn't mean we should discard it.
I 100% agree with that.
I
I'm a
believe it could,
preservationist
yeah.
for sure.
I believe in that, and has some good, a lot of nice character. And not just that, we don't have a facility on this side. We have Boys and Girls Club over at, in Councilwoman Priestley's ward. She's got Boys and Girls Club, and looks like those apartments that are in front of it, they're working on them. And I will take, listen, what I'm going to do is I'll get with you about those with the owner, the new owner. So, so that we can be on the same page. I have them in my ward also. So, but I think that when we talk about Haskell, we don't have anything on that side of town to where children can swim, where families can really sit in the park. There's the nice pavilion that's there. The baseball fields used to be full. That they would play and the leagues would play. To bring that back again, I think is something that's important. Get people out of the house, get them out into the parks that are in the communities, because that to me is when we stabilize our neighborhoods, we keep people in them and we keep kids in them. And I like the PAL program with it, because these young people need mentors. And you have the police who volunteer, or it's part of their duty that if this is the Chiefs program, that the police officers will be there, so they'll get to know and catch some of these children before they become a product of the streets, so that we can save some lives. Haskell is important, and that covers, it's not just the west, but it covers the north side. It covers a huge part of our community. So,
Agreed.
but we are on the same page. So I am those are all of my questions. And just to wrap up for my colleagues, Suzanne would like a list of the parks in your neighborhoods so that she can keep track of your,
And the capital improvements
and the
that you'd
capital
like to see
improvement.
happen in
So
those
our
parks.
Christmas list for parks.
Right.
She would like our Christmas list for parks.
Which I
please.
think we probably have. I just want to compare to what we have kind of online for what our thoughts are for parks improvements. And obviously, you're out in your ward every day.
Yeah.
So you know best. But we do try to work with your residents as well. We're definitely community-driven, so we have a good idea of what parks, and not just parks, what amenities are needed. I just want to see what you have identified and make sure that they're in agreement. If we've missed something, then make sure that we're adding it too.
I don't think I need to send an email to everyone to send their wish list. So we're good. So I would like to say Councilman Mays, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Ms. Wilcox, when I talk to Ms. Bell and I talk about Bassett and Haskell and I hear all about the parks, I'm talking this fiscal year's budget. So for that particular project, regardless of what folks say, I'm trying to make sure the funds are allocated for this fiscal year, July 1st to June the next year. And so I don't want that to go past, you know. If they said something and we can help it, and we're dealing with a bunch of parks, but this fiscal year is the conversation that I'm interested in for that. We'll see what happens. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Councilman. I just want to just remind everyone, we have a budget hearing tomorrow, which is May 12th, and callbacks. So it'll be tomorrow, 5:30 until, but we begin with MERS. So that is the legacy cost. They will be here, so get your questions ready so we can, I'm quite sure everyone have enough, by the time I get to it, there probably won't be any. But this concludes the budget hearing for today, Wednesday, May 11th. The time is 7:40 PM. Thank you, Ms. Wilcox.
Thank you.